Okay guys, so what I did today was work on a rainbow of hope. It is in support of all of our essential workers. So I picked the colors of the rainbow, started cutting them up, make sure they were all the same size. Cut them in half again because I don't need all of them right now. Started rolling them up, making snakes because I am going to make rainbows. So I want to roll them all out, make exactly the same size snakes with them. Ended up cutting a little bit off because these were still too much. So there's all my snakes. Make sure they're all exactly the same thickness, and then I put them together. Just rolling any of them out that are a little bit thicker in some spots just to make sure they're all exactly the same. And I trimmed the ends off to make sure they're all the same length. I rolled these out, but then kind of changed my mind about what I was going to do. Kind of smushed these smushed them, flattened them a tiny bit, and then I was like, oh, I can't bend them to make the rainbows, so I cut them here. My plan was to make 4 rainbows from that whole thing, but it didn't work out. There I'm realizing it can't work, so I pulled them apart, rolled them up a little bit more to round them back out, and went through, did all those, made sure they were the same width. And then started forming my rainbow. So basically what I did is did these little snakes, and then I just wrapped the colors around the previous color. Still double checking to make sure they're all the same thickness and they're all proportionate all the way around. Excuse me, guys. I know the ends are not exactly straight, but when I finish, I will cut them all to be exactly the same. So then I flattened them a tiny bit and trimmed the ends on that one. Here's my second one. Already got it ready. I want to make them look as close as possible to each other, which is pretty hard to do when they're not directly side by side. So I'm going to cut the end off that one. That one's still a little bit longer. Okay, so then this time I wanted to make it a little bit differently. I went ahead and made a long oval. Instead of doing it in 2 steps, I decided to try it like this. It worked out pretty well. So basically same concept, except I did an oval, and then I'm going to cut them in half once I get them all wrapped out. Once again, just checking to make sure they're all exactly the same. Trying to make my cuts exactly in the same spot on each side. I make a fresh new cut each time so that it is flat and not pointy, and to make sure that I have the exact same amount of clay. That one I'm trying to roll back in because it was a little bit skinnier. There we go, only one color left. And I didn't exactly use red because I really wasn't feeling the red. I mixed up a fuchsia pink and a little bit of red together to get this color. Just because I really didn't like the color red I have. And since we are in quarantine or stay at home, I can't just run and grab a new color. So I've been making a lot of the colors by mixing colors I have together. So this one turned out pretty good. I have to move my tray a little bit. And there, I cut it unevenly. But it's okay, because I'll fix it here. That end needed to be rolled out a little bit more. I stuck my nail in it, so I had to fix that spot. So there they are, all done. Now this time I wanted to make some little studs, so I made it way smaller. I wanted to do like your half rainbow arches, so basically I just went through the same process again, but did it a lot smaller. Thus, I rolled these out even thinner. So just making sure they're all even, your circle, oval, or whatever you're working on looks symmetrical all the way around. And last color. I worked on these pieces. My recording time was around 2 hours, but I paused a lot and didn't record everything. So my work time today was about 3 hours on prepping all the clay pieces. Of course, once they're baked, they have to be sanded and then assembled. Here we go. I rolled this one out. And then, once it felt smooth, I cut it in half. And then I cut it in half again. So I made 4 equal pieces. I messed that piece up with pulling too hard. My blade wasn't wet. I used rubbing alcohol to keep my blade nice and wet so that it glides through easily. So I made those, and then I wanted to make little clouds, but I didn't have a cloud cutter, so I went with rolling out some white clay. It's really important when you're working with white clay after you use color that you clean everything, because the transfer is unreal. So I wiped everything down with alcohol, rolled my white out, made sure it was even, and then I use these little white hearts instead of clouds. Always cut extra just to be safe, because I will mess something up when it comes to these cutters. Okay, so I messed up one of the hearts instantly, but I added the little hearts to the rainbows here. So what I'm doing is moving the hearts, wiping this spot down because it was a little dry and crumbly from the clay. So here on the clouds, I have to fix little spots on the side, and that's what you see me doing right here because the cutter leaves an indentation. So I did this first one a little bit differently than I did this other ones. I don't know if I showed the process for the other ones. But there we go. I just added the little heart. Looks like a cloud to the rainbow. That's how they look. So then I cut my pieces up again in half. Making sure they're all about the same size. It just helps when you're working with the same exact size pieces, in my opinion, when you're doing something like this. So then I rolled snakes out again. Made sure they were all the same length. Here I'm going to be doing a stripe or a dangle of sorts. Okay, so here I am rolling all these snakes in the same size and putting them together in a straight line. Cutting the ends off, and now I'm going to do my best to make it as straight as possible. And then I'm going to roll it out flat so all the pieces stick together. These become a little wavy, which is okay. That's the look I was going for. Cut the ends off again, and then I'm going to cut it in half, and then those in half as well. It was really hard to see because I wasn't able to look over top of it, so I didn't get these exactly the same size, but that's okay. So I really liked how this first piece was smaller at the top than the bottom, so I went with that. I rounded the edges, and I'm going to make it a dangle piece for the bottom. And I tried to use this piece, but it wasn't the same thickness, and I didn't really like it, so I put that one to the side and went with the middle piece. Rounded these off to make it look exactly like the other. Move that one over to the side so I didn't accidentally smush it. Rounded the edges just like the other one and rolled them down just a touch more, and they're the same, so I'm going to move them over to my baking tray. And these I decided, because they were a little bit different thickness, to make studs with them. So here I rolled them down and then I cut them out. Circle studs. I loved how all the colors were in these. They turned out really awesome. So then here's all my scraps. I cut them all up in little tiny pieces, mixed them all in really well. Rolled them all up in a ball. Now I'm going to bring my clay roller in. Moved it up a little bit because I realized I couldn't turn the handle with it sitting flat on the table like that, but I had to have it here so you guys could see what I was doing. So I put it through my clay roller. It ripped, but that's okay. I just fold it in half again, and then we'll go through the press one more time. Okay, so this is the piece I ended up with, and I'm going to make little studs, hearts, triangles, circles, and or hexagons, I believe. I think I did 2 pair out of each one. Sometimes they get stuck and you just have to push them out. Please excuse my child screaming through the door loud enough that you can hear him. Okay, so I took the remainder of the blocks I had and I cut them in half again, rolled them out. This time I'm going to make little sheets of each of the colors off to the side because it was too complicated on the camera. I have my clay roller and I'm rolling each piece out. Here we go. And then I'm using this slicer that I have that gives me all the exact same size slices. Next, I'm going to make stripes, and these are really cool. I took all the pieces off that were not full stripes. Okay, so here I'm wiping off a little bit of the orange that got on the purple, and I'm going to pop this bubble, and I'm going to roll these pieces out. So here we go. I just roll them out, take off the pieces that are not exactly the same size. I started putting some over to the side because I had too much on that one area. This one I had way too much of, so I cut some off. And now I'm going to lay this bottom piece out, the color you choose first, and I'm going to start stacking all the layers in the same color that we did our rainbows. And I'm just going to keep going till I don't have any more long enough pieces. It gets kind of difficult once you get up high because it starts to want to lean over. It works best if you try to make sure all the pieces facing towards you are level. Here I started to move some of my pieces because they were getting all stuck together. And if I have some pieces that are smaller, that's okay because I can just trim it off at the end. But usually I go with the smallest piece I have, and I try not to go any shorter than that. If I do have some shorter pieces, I will just pull them a little bit to stretch them to the length where it works. These do not have to be perfect, but like I said, the part facing towards me, I like to make sure is all lined up. The backs hang over a little bit, but that's okay because you're not going to see that part. You're going to lay it down and roll it out. So here we go. I stacked all the colors up. Once you get it going, it starts happening. Okay, so they started falling over. So there we go. There is our pieces. I moved all these other scraps to the side. And I rolled it out a little bit before I decided to cut, just because I wanted them to stick together. So there we go. Straightened it out. I want this piece to be as straight as possible when I'm rolling it, so I'm only going to roll it down, and I'm going to... Okay, so this is once I put it through the press, and here we go. This is actually the second piece. My battery ran dead, so I didn't get the cutouts of the first piece. This one intentionally I curved there because I wanted to do a little bit of effect on that spot, so that had to do with how I put it through my roller. And I'm just making a bunch of studs and circles. Did some more heart studs. And it's okay if you don't get everything even, because more than likely, once you're sanding or drilling, something's going to break. So it's okay. I haven't had one yet that I haven't had a piece break on. So I needed one more triangle out of this one. So I'll use that little scrap to the side that I had. Okay, so these are all the scraps from that piece. I rolled these up into a snake, and then I am just cutting little chunks out of it. Now I move that, clean my spot, and I'm going to roll out some white. I'm not going to roll it very thin because you'll see why in just a second. So I still have it pretty thick. I'm going to cut my edges off so that I can make sure that my palette, which is what I'm making, is nice and the proper shape. So I rolled it out a little bit more. I realized it was a little uneven. And I'm going to lay those pieces that I cut. Then I'm going to add some single dots. All over. This is a small little slab. It looks like now, but it actually turned into be a really large piece because it was still pretty thick when I was working on it. I wanted to make sure that I left it thick enough that these pieces were going to be stretched out pretty good. So in order to make bigger dots and little dots, what you do is put your pieces in the bigger dots, you'll roll out again. So every time you roll out, those spots are going to be bigger than the times that you finish afterwards. So there's all my dots, and there it is through the roller. I only rolled half of that slab because it actually was pretty big and I didn't want it to tear. So here we go again. This is the white pieces that are going to go with the rainbow pieces. Had a bubble, so I pop that and continue to roll. I don't like using the white in the roller just because it's so soft. It sticks really bad no matter what I do. So I try to hand roll these. So I have to make sure I get it nice and even as best as I can. So I wanted clouds, but I didn't have a cloud cutter. So I had these flowers. So I cut them out and then I stretched them. So there's all the pieces of that. Basically, I just did clouds and circles of the last piece. Now, this is some accent pieces I wanted to go with the studs. Since I didn't do any solid colors, I have rolled out a pretty thick slab of white, and I'm putting gold flake on it, or gold leaf. Just placing these anywhere I like. I'm going to do 2 sets of these. So I'm going to get it pretty covered, and then I'm going to roll it out and then put some more on. I love the effect this gives. So see how it cracks like that? I'm going to put some more in to fill in the empty spots. And as you can see through the entire video, I continue to try to use all the scraps. So when you see a collection, I start with an idea, and then what I have left I use, and I roll that up, and then I print that out, or push that out the press, and then I will keep reusing it until I have very little scrap left, just so that I don't waste the product. So this was the remainder of white I had left over from the clouds, and look how it gives it that gold speckled effect. I really love the gold leaf on the pieces. So I'm going to cut out a ton of circle studs. I did some diamonds and some bigger circles. Basically, I want a white pair of studs to go with every one of the rainbow sets I did for the stud packs. So as you can see here, I'm going to pull all of these up. And then I'm going to use this scrap again. So this was my leftover scrap. I'm going to sprinkle some glitter in it. And I'm going to pick all that up. I'm going to sprinkle some more. Make sure it's really good in there. Okay, so this is what I have. I picked that side up. Didn't really like it. Was going to fold it, but then I liked how the other side looked. But I sprinkled some more glitter on it. And cut them out. And this was my finished pieces. So there was tray 1 and then tray 2. Then they're going to go in the oven.